Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. It's great to see so many of you here in the room. My name is Arran McPherson, and I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister of Ecosystems and Ocean Science at Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and I'm very proud to be one of Canada's representatives in the governance structure for the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance, or AORIA for short. As we've discussed earlier this week, and I think everyone in this room is very well aware, the ocean is facing incredible challenges, whether it's marine pollution, the loss of marine biodiversity, or climate change. It's extremely important, and I think it's been a theme that's been consistent across every single session in this conference thus far, is the need to work together collaboratively to address these challenges. And it's in that spirit of collaboration that the All-Atlantic Alliance was formed to advance a shared vision for ocean science cooperation with the aim of ensuring a sustainable and healthy Atlantic Ocean. So while the Alliance is still joining and still welcoming new partners, we're currently comprised of a number of countries represented here today: Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Cape Verde, the European Union, Morocco, Norway, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and our numbers continue to grow. Today's event has for its goal to highlight the collaborative, innovative, and more importantly, the solution-based scientists that's taking place in the context of the Ocean Decade and in the Atlantic. Over the course of our time together this afternoon, we'll hear from Atlantic collaborators, we'll hear from leaders who share their experience and I hope their perspectives on the opportunity that Atlantic partnerships present to mobilize action in support of the decade outcomes and in broader ocean health. We'll also take the opportunity to shine a spotlight on some examples of Atlantic-focused initiatives that share AORIA's vision, including the Partnership for Atlantic Cooperation and the EU mission to restore our oceans and waters, as well as showcase some other projects that are currently underway. We hope that today's session will inspire you to get involved by learning more about the projects you'll hear about today, by bringing forward your ideas and existing collaborations in the question and answer period at the end of our session, and by learning more about the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Innovation and Alliance and how to participate. Because it's only through collective action that we will possibly meet the challenges that have been put before us to address the really key threats to the ocean and sustainability. I'm now going to just invite our first panel to join me on the stage. So I'll introduce them as they're making their way to the stage and to these seats, and there is a stairway on the far end of the stage. So we have Ambassador Jessye Lapenn, the Senior Coordinator for Atlantic Cooperation in the United States, Leandro, Pedron, the Director of Thematic Programs, the Secretariat for Strategic Policies and Programs in the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation in Brazil. We have Ms. Alison Clausen, the Deputy Coordinator of the UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainability for the IUC UNESCO. We have Gilbert, Siko, the Acting Chief Director of Science Missions and Director of Marine and Polar Research from South Africa's Department of Science and Innovation, and Gideon Henderson, the Chief Science Advisor, Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs in the UK. Thank you so much all for joining. So the format for the discussion with these panelists will be that I'll be posing a question to each of them and inviting them to add as questions are posed to their colleagues on the stage. I'll then turn it to my colleague from the United States who will moderate a second panel where we'll highlight some key projects and initiatives, and then turn to a third to offer some concluding comments. So I'll first turn to Ambassador Lapenn, and there are some mics there on the table that I'll ask you to share. In my introduction, I mentioned AORIA, the All-Atlantic Alliance. So maybe you could start by telling us a bit more about the Partnership on Atlantic Cooperation, and then sharing how you see the efforts in the partnership and AORIA working in a complementary way to build a strong scientific community for a sustainable Atlantic Ocean.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Dr. McPherson. I'm really happy to be in this conversation and joining everyone for really the broader, very exciting week. So I'm here specifically in my role as the U.S. Senior Coordinator for Atlantic Cooperation, and I contextualize my remarks that way because it's a new role And it really, literally, the creation of a role, as a bureaucrat, I know this well, reflects how we are thinking about our priorities. And so for the U.S. administration, creating a new structure around Atlantic cooperation was a very concerted, intentional decision that's really driven our commitment in this space. And we've been really building out in a meaningful way over the last year, suggesting that those ideas have real resonance and currency. I have to say that I am, by background, not a scientist, so I sometimes get a bit intimidated in contexts like this, but as a diplomat, I will spell out my acronyms if everybody will please, define your terms when it's your turn. But I think this question on complementarity is really important, especially given limited financial and human resources as we look at a whole host of major ocean-related challenges. And so I want to talk about that because I think it is enormously complementary, but I also, maybe to do that, I'll sort of lay the table in terms of talking about the Partnership for Atlantic Cooperation. At its basis, at its core, it takes the premise that those countries around the Atlantic Ocean are a community, that we have things in common. We have common problems, we have solutions that are appropriate and valuable to share, and that there are threads that bind us around the Atlantic. And so raising up that framework, putting the ocean, not the land, at the center of how we organize ourselves is really the core of what we are trying to do. Last September, over 30 ministers convened to launch the partnership. We now number 39 countries. Those countries have come together to identify shared priorities, not sort of the only priorities and not the forever priorities, but the first priorities. And they are, they're priorities where we have agreed, we have common interests, common challenges, and the platform specifically can benefit those issues. I caveat it in that way because there's lots of ways of racking and stacking priorities. But those priorities then include marine spatial planning, ocean observation, food and nutrition insecurity, innovative finance, and abandoned and lost fishing gear. So it's a full gamut of the kinds of issues we're looking at. The way I really think about our complementarity with AAORIA is, in the first instance, we are fundamentally motivated, animated by similar ideas around collaboration, a belief that as Atlantic states we have an instinct to, an ability to effectively collaborate and to address problems together. So the sort of, again, this animating principle is clearly there. I think the complication can come around challenges on duplication. And here I think we're weaving our way to a really constructive place, which is how do we think about scientists leaning across the policy space and policymakers leaning across the science space. And that's where we all come together to meet, because we know we need policy to be informed by science, that science and data and information and research need to be informing policy decisions. And so that's then a really valuable space of complementarity. In a specific way, with US colleagues from NOAA, our lead science agency, whom you'll hear in the next panel, we are working to develop an approach on ocean observation specifically. And here we're picking up on work that the EU had done under the Atlantos program. We are specifically right now going through our own domestic procedures, including congressional notification. So with all of the requisite caveats, I'm happy to say that our expectation is we will be able to move about $8.5 million into the Atlantic Ocean observation space and some other partnership priorities. The goal there is really to move forward the agenda and to collect and gather information and to enable an understanding of the Atlantic Ocean, which is then going to inform all Atlantic partners as they think how to protect it, make the most of it, and preserve it for generations to come. So with that, my 3.5 minutes, I think, are up.
Thank you so much for that. My next question is for Gilbert. So we could pass him the mic. That's wonderful. And I think we've heard today and yesterday just the value of that international collaboration. I'm wondering what challenges and opportunities come from working in a field like ocean science, whose questions and data don't respect boundaries and often extend beyond individual national jurisdictions, and how you feel AAORIA can most effectively leverage those efforts given the necessity for collaboration in ocean science.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a very important question, particularly that yesterday, over the days, I think in the side events and side meetings, one of the things that have been indicated is that the challenges have been identified. So it's not a question of now trying to sit down and think. We all know what are the challenges. The most important thing that needs to happen is action. So we all know that, I think it's been said again and again, that there are quite now a lot of financial challenges there, and their countries have got different pressures, different priorities. I think there are competing mandates within the nations. But and most importantly, we've all got to a stage where we've all agreed that collaborative research, particularly in the ocean space, as we all know that currently the ocean has got no borders. There are no physical borders, and in terms of whatever that happens in one side of the ocean also affects the other side. The other countries are also affected. Most importantly, what we've realized, particularly as South Africa, I'll provide a South African perspective, is that in this case, we realize that even if we put our resources and dedicate our resources towards set goals or set objectives, addressing set objectives, it will not help, ultimately. One of the things, one of the pioneers of the All-Atlantic Ocean, AAORIA, from Brazil, used to give this proverb, the African proverb, that if you want to go fast, go alone, and then if you want to go farther or far, you have to go together. I think that is the approach that we've seen, and it works. It's like sort of for us, we have adopted that as a sort of like a motto for AAORIA, because using collective efforts, collective initiatives, cooperation, we've seen it's able to achieve a lot of things. So in this case, we need to be action focused. I think last year when South Africa, when we hosted the AAORIA forum, there were 2 actions that were identified. Most importantly is that, okay, fine, one action will be led by the EC and the other will be led by the US. But then, by leading, it doesn't necessarily mean it resides with them. It means it's open for people. For example, in South Africa, we decided, yes, we're going to be more active. We've already started a program that will contribute to those 2 actions, to say, by the time we get to Canada, the next All-Atlantic Forum, we have actions. We have set down the actions. These are the tangibles that we have achieved. Most importantly for us as well, we felt like, yes, as an African state, it's good that to be part of AAORIA, but then one of our biggest objectives in this case, particularly looking at the forum that is advertised, I think there's banners there showing you on the forum. What happens is that we need to bring African partners within the Atlantic. So we are engaging with the African partners to show them that there is value in collaborations, because for us to be able to address those challenges, we cannot do it alone, but then we will then take them to Canada to show that this is a commitment that we're enabled to achieve a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. And actually, the next question is for Gideon, and it really builds nicely from your comments and those of Ambassador Lapenn. A question for you is, how effective, in your experience, are international ocean science efforts in impacting and contributing to domestic policies? And are there some successes and challenges that you've encountered that you can share with us?
They are effective. International science is definitely effective. In fact, it's more than just effective, it's totally essential. As Gilbert has already said, the ocean processes that we care about don't respect national borders. They affect the whole of a wider region and often the globe. So if we're going to understand those processes, as we must to inform policy, we need to be thinking at a much bigger scale than you can think about nationally. And then, of course, the oceans, they're big. And one nation alone cannot fully understand the ocean globally. So working together in partnership is absolutely essential. And it's that physical understanding, that natural understanding of the world and the science that must inform the policy making that we do so that it's up to date and well evidenced. I'll use a couple of examples of where I think there have been effective programs, and I'll start from one which is very much from my own experience, and that's the GeoTraces program, which looked at ocean chemistry. It's a program that I was involved in initiating, and I watched that build to be a program that's now really revolutionized our understanding of micronutrients and pollutants in the ocean, just as one example of an effective international cooperation that involved many. That was a grassroots program that was organized under the aegis of the Scientific Committee for Oceanic Research, SCORE. But I might pick on a second example, which initiated as a bilateral. That's the RAPID array, which looked at overturning circulation in the Atlantic and grew to be a bigger program and has informed policy on both sides of the Atlantic because of the information that it's given and whole new science that it's given as a consequence. There are many other examples I could use. I'll just pick on one more to mention in particular, which is IAtlantic, which is an AAORIA-funded program which is now really changing our understanding and drawing together information about biodiversity and biological richness across the whole Atlantic. But there are countless others. I was involved in a program, in a session this morning about seabed mapping, another example, temperature, salinity, carbon uptake. All of these things benefit from international engagement. The barriers, though, the challenges, there are many, but I'd like to just highlight three quickly. One of which is that to be successful, you absolutely need to have champions. You need to have an individual or a group of individuals who are absolutely willing to harness the energy of others and conquer the barriers that will be put in the way to make success happen. A second challenge is of priorities. There's a limited amount of funding for this sort of work. We must be realistic about this, and that means as a scientific community, there needs to be a recognition of what are the top priorities and an effort not to duplicate, but to focus on those priorities. And the third challenge, to bring it back to the policy domain, is that policy and science often operate at somewhat different scales to each other. And if you look at some of the controversial subjects that are coming up at the moment, like deep sea mining or marine carbon dioxide removal, the pace at which policy needs to be made on those subjects is often exceeds that in which you can deliver the scientific underpinning evidence. So I think there's a role, as we've heard already here, to really reach across the boundary there for policymakers to be willing to look broadly at science, but particularly for scientists to be thinking what are going to be the policy challenges of the future and making sure that we're designing the right programs now to face into those policy challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. So my next question is for Leandro. And another clear theme that came across yesterday, I think, was inclusion. And so my question for you relates to that subject. AAORIA has expressed a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, in particular efforts to advance gender equity and intergenerational participation in ocean science, and to support meaningful engagement of Indigenous people. How can we support early career scientists and underrepresented individuals and groups to succeed in ocean science? And what do you think are the main barriers to participation?
Thank you, Dr. McPherson. It's a great honor to be here, and thank you for the organization for this panel. For this question, I think we see a lot of barriers. It may seem like difficult to overcome them, but it's not that difficult. I will start with an example that we did in the side events and the Ocean Conference. When we start to build in the process to understand and to do the inscriptions for the side events, we start to talk about how and who will be speaking and how we're gonna to let them people to talk. And I usually heard that the right thing to do was to lead the event for the professionals, the professors that have already been working at the Brazilian committee for the decade. But then I started to think, like, why we don't open this opportunity for the earliest, the youngers that have been studying and working a lot. So that's what we decided, and we put Mariana Andrade, that is a ECOP that belongs to our National Decade Committee, and this was amazing. So when we talk about some both not representatives, like when you're talking about some groups that are underrepresented, usually the group that stay on top is overrepresented. So this is an example. We need to open and lead these people and open the opportunity for the young generation, the early professors, the other researchers to talk about. And our evaluation about the event itself, that was amazing because we were discussing and a colleague from South Africa, I think, that mentioned that we need to stop move from capacity building to building on African capacity. So that's why we need to ask and lead the young people, I'm sorry about the English, but to open the opportunity for the youngers to talk about and see from another perspective as well. And one other thing that I think is, it's been helping a lot is our necessity for discuss more about ocean literacy. I personally myself, didn't know much about ocean literacy until I stopped to think about it and talk about it and see other people talking about it. So ocean literacy for Brazil is another tool that we can use to overcome all these obstacles that you have mentioned. So when we talk about this, that can be like more difficult, is not to look at these obstacles, this necessity to overcome intergenerational or equity in gender, and not just look that as an obstacle that we need to overcome, but how the results from that we can take. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that discussion about ocean literacy leads well into tomorrow's session at the plenary in the morning. So thank you for that. Now the last question for these panelists is for Alison. So maybe we could pass the mic. Perfect. Alison, in the context of the Atlantic Ocean and given your role, your substantial role in the Ocean Decade, what do you think are the opportunities for AAORIA and its members to leverage this regional coordination to achieve a greater impact in support of the Ocean Decade?
Thank you. Thanks for the question, and thanks for having me here. I mean, just to start off, before we start looking specifically at the Atlantic, I think I'd just really like to emphasize the point that the Ocean Decade has a very strong role on regional action. And it has this, this strong focus because so much of the impact of the decade is only going to be achieved by working at the regional level. It's the decade of ocean science for sustainable development, but we've been trying to be very clear that that's not just the 2030 agenda. That's all of the national policy frameworks, and very importantly, it's all of the regional policy frameworks that are so important to actually effectuating the change and the impact that we've been talking about here today. So the decade can only have the impact if it is generating the science, the knowledge, the skills, the technology that can feed into the regional policy frameworks, into the regional governance structures, into the regional management. And so pleased to hear Gideon and Ambassador Lapenn also talking about this need for the policy to be driving the science, because I think, we've got so much work happening at the regional level and including in the Atlantic through the decade, and it's been this amazing groundswell of bottom-up energy and enthusiasm and resourcing and initiatives. And I think one thing that we're hearing very strongly at this particular point in the decade and during this conference, which is a moment of reflection, is we need to start working harder on building the processes for the regional policy frameworks to be driving the science questions, because we don't have time. I mean, as Gideon said, this is urgent now. We need to prioritise prioritize. We can't do everything, and so we need to be looking at the regional policies, the regional management, and then seeing how the science can help with that. But coming back to the Atlantic, honestly, there's huge potential for the decade to work more closely with AAORIA. I think we've made some good baby steps in that direction, and I really hope they continue, because the Atlantic is one of the regions where we have a huge amount of activity going on, some of our biggest programs, some of our biggest projects, but yet we're really lacking for the decade a coordination structure or a coordination platform where we can bring those different things together and find ways for the different programs and initiatives working in the decade, not only to collectively work together, but to collectively work with everything that's happening outside the decade. And I think through AAORIA, we have member states, and thinking of Brazil with the very first National Decade Committee that was created, and such a leader and so strong, and UK and South Africa, the US and Canada, of course, just to name a few. We have so many of the member states of AAORIA who are individually at the national level so engaged, and so you can imagine if you can use the force that those the members of AAORIA can bring together, and then bringing in the European Commission as well, we have such a possibility to build on what is already there and use that to also help create that collective impact through the decade, and basically leverage off the platform that AAORIA creates to be able to achieve even greater impact to, as I said at the outset, to help start identifying these policy priorities and the ocean science priorities within the Atlantic. So very much looking forward to continuing the conversation and the collaboration, and seeing how we can leverage the partnership of the decade in AAORIA.
Thank you so much, Alison, and please join me in thanking these panelists for all of their insightful comments. Thank you. So with that, I'll invite our panelists to return to their seats, and I'll welcome Steve Thur to the podium. Steve is the Assistant Administrator for Oceanographic and Atmospheric Research at the United States National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and is going to take it from here.
Good afternoon, all. So we've got a small break and a bit of a treat for us between our two panels. We have a video to show, and I'd like to invite Dr. Marjolaine Matabos from IFREMER to come up, give a few words about the film, Deep Sea Science on Board a Research Expedition, and then our lovely IT wizards will make it appear for us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today to introduce this movie on behalf of the IAtlantic community. So the IAtlantic project came together in 2019 to conduct the first ever comprehensive ecosystem health assessment of the Atlantic Ocean. Last week, the project concluded its mission and the impact of its results. So from observation of tropicalization of IAtlantic species to a greater understanding of the turning circulation variability over time, and documentation of direct impact of deep sea mining plumes on midwater species, while the impact of these results on policy making will be exciting to watch unfold over the coming months and years. So none of this work would have been possible without the expedition that IAtlantic scientists took to some of the most remote places in the Atlantic Ocean. This expedition carried out a long legacy of deep ocean exploration, and it was our privilege to document them in order to help bring a better understanding of scientific research and expeditions to the world, and show what can be achieved through collaboration. With that, we present our movie, Deep Sea Science on Board a Research Expedition.
Since the dawn of human civilization, we have looked out across the ocean and wondered what lies beneath the waves. As recently as the 19th century, scientists debated whether life could even exist in the deep ocean. So, in 1872, Scottish scientist Charles Wyville Thomson led the groundbreaking HMS Challenger expedition to answer that question once and for all. Over 4 years, Challenger covered 70,000 nautical miles, discovered over 4,000 new species, and reached the deepest parts of the oceans. The Challenger voyage gave birth to the discipline of oceanography, setting the stage for modern deep-sea exploration. Now, 150 years later, modern research ships are still uncovering the mysteries of the oceans.
My name is Murray Roberts, and I'm the coordinator of IAtlantic, a project that's conducting an integrated assessment of Atlantic marine ecosystems in space and time.
Running a project like IAtlantic requires precise planning and coordination, both on land and at sea. Research vessels are marvels of specialized engineering, serving as floating laboratories equipped with state-of-the-art facilities.
ROVs in the water.
These ships become temporary homes for crews and scientists alike, boasting cozy accommodation, catering facilities, communal areas, and even gyms and cinemas, with some research vessels spanning 100 meters and weighing over 15,000 tons. They're equipped to handle even the harshest sea conditions, including specially strengthened hulls for polar exploration. The ships also carry ROVs, underwater robots that give scientists access to the deepest reaches of the sea floor. These versatile machines carry precise manipulators and host a range of scientific instruments to gather different types of data and samples from the deep. They are connected to the ship by a fiber optic cable, so they can be piloted in real time from the onboard control room. Alongside ROVs, landers also play a crucial role in deep-sea science. These frameworks, equipped with scientific instruments, are dropped into the ocean to gather data and samples and later return to the surface through a remote release mechanism. Conducting deep ocean expeditions demands a combination of high and low-tech equipment, manned by skilled technicians working around the clock to adapt to ever-changing sea conditions. The cruise schedule is meticulously planned to operate around the clock, with some people becoming completely nocturnal during a voyage. These expeditions can last between 2 and 6 weeks and are often constrained by the availability of fresh food. At the end of each expedition, the team compiles their findings into a comprehensive report, the keystone reference for years to come. These ventures also yield crucial contributions to scientific knowledge, from more accurate deep-sea floor maps to the discovery of entirely new species. However, identifying and cataloguing these newfound plants and animals can take years of dedicated work. Understanding what's actually in the deep ocean is an essential part of knowing how to protect it in our rapidly changing world. Today, in an era of climate change, deep ocean expeditions and long-term monitoring are more important than ever. These endeavors unite people from across the globe in a shared mission to understand and protect our rapidly changing world. Deep ocean expeditions bring people together across nations to work on the shared challenge of understanding our world, its changing climate, and the impact that has on all who live there. When we harness our curiosity and shared humanity, there's no limit to what we can achieve to understand and protect the miraculous hidden world of our oceans.
I want to congratulate the IAtlantic team for putting together that message. I want to sign up. So can I trade in my desk job and go to sea with you all? I think it was a tremendous visual collage of the motivations of the deep sea and a really, really awe-inspiring message to those that hopefully will be drawn to the sea for research in the future. Congratulations. I'd like to ask for our next panel to approach the stage, and I will introduce them as they are approaching. The stairs are on your far left. And we have a series of projects that are going to share what they have been about for the last few years. First up will be Anna Lillebot and Ada Beataya Uvauda, who will be talking to us about A-AAGORA and Climarest, Mission Ocean and Waters Innovation Actions. Next up will be Agustín Sánchez-Arcilla, who will talk to us about the Rest Coast project. And Christine Zinkman will speak to us about Atlantos. Ronaldo Cristofoletti will speak to us about Blue Schools. Simon Legendre will speak to us about DOCAT Women and Youth Technical Capacity for the Blue Economy. And our final speaker will be Niall McDonough, who will speak to us about the Okeano CSA, which supports the AAORIA Alliance. So panelists, I would like to remind you, target is 4 minutes. My colleague will flash green at you with a minute to go, and if she gets to red, that means it's time to pass the mic, but I'm sure you'll all be good. If you have slides, we will also pass the clicker, and unfortunately you may have to crane your neck to see your own slides. But please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm from A-AAGORA project, and our contribution to the missions is through the development of a blueprint for the Atlantic-Arctic Agora, seen as an open space for the co-development of innovative solutions, but also to foster deliberative democracy. And to this end, we have 3 demonstrators and several associated regions, to which we want to showcase that the reduction of pressures in coastal areas can be done through the application of ecosystem-based management and nature-based solutions. So we have in the northern Norway the Troms archipelago, we have the Cork County in Ireland, and the mainland Portugal central region, where we develop these activities, and it goes from kelp forest restoration, from the biodiversity management through ecosystem-based management inside and outside marine protected areas. Also actions for sustainable tourism in Ireland, also focusing on biodiversity, but involving volunteers, also coastal erosion and dune systems restoration. And then, no, I realized it was a wrong slide. And then, sorry for that. And then in Portugal, we are also focusing on biodiversity restoration in hard infrastructures, namely port areas, also decarbonization of port activities combined with the restoration of blue carbon ecosystems, so that we can have this balance between decarbonization and fostering blue carbon ecosystems, and also on the on coastal erosion mitigation and dune restoration. So we are using a living lab approach. You can see it's coastal restoration with nature and people. So we are following this quintuplo helix involving the governments, industries, the civil society, and we are tracking real problems involving all these interested parts to find these innovative solutions, but also to test them in situ so that we can build up these roadmaps. And very important is we are involving associated regions to co-develop these roadmaps. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I on? No. Okay, so Anna and me, we actually answered to the same Horizon call, and we have many of the same solutions. My project is Climarest. It's also an innovation action in the Mission Ocean Arctic-Atlantic Lighthouse. We work with the large-scale restoration of coastal ecosystems for climate resilience in coastal communities. And we are also working with some nature-based solutions that are not directly related to restoration. So, we have 5 demos all along the northern Atlantic, European side. Starting on Svalbard, we work with untreated sewage and how that impacts the fjord ecosystems. And we try to find different solutions to reduce this sewage pollution. We also work with nature-based solution for coastal erosion in areas which have permafrost, where we're using natural materials and also taking nature into account in the structures. Moving down to Ireland, we also work with seagrass restoration, and we focus there too on blue carbon. In France, we work with oyster reef restoration, blue carbon here as well, and also seawalls that are incorporating biodiversity solutions. In Spain, we work with the environment under mussel raft aquaculture installations, where the environment is not good at the moment, so we are using artificial reefs and reintroduction of species to try to improve the habitats under these mussel rafts. And in Madeira, in Portugal, we work with macroalgae forest restoration, where one of the problems is grazers and invasive species. Sorry, I have to look at my phone because I don't want to look in the back. Let me see. So in the project, we are developing all these tools for stakeholder involvement and for restoration projects and also nature-based solution projects that we will integrate into a... that we will integrate into an online toolbox after the project is finished. So we are working in the piloting phase of the Mission Ocean, and then we will support the upscaling and develop replication phase by making our tools accessible in the next phase. Let me see. So I will briefly introduce our toolbox. This is when you're doing a restoration project, you have some steps to follow, and you need to know what is the problem in your system that you're going to restore. So you need to have a diagnosis of your system. If you work with seagrass, you need to understand why this seagrass disappeared. And then you can set the goals of your restoration and then define some actions. It seems fairly easy and linear, but you need to know a lot about your system, and you need to have a lot of data to be able to do so. And that's why we need to support those who are performing the restoration with data retrieval, monitoring protocols, restoration protocols, etc. And for a natural scientist, it seems fairly easy still. But then you have the social science part of things. So we are working to integrate these disciplines and to make solutions that are tailored based on both the social science and stakeholder involvement and also the natural science side. This toolbox is going to be modular, and we're going to make it available, and we really want to have contact with other projects that want their solutions to be incorporated in our toolbox. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And one of the things that I noted in both of your remarks is the diversity of ecosystems and human communities that are being studied, and I hope that that is something that can be exported elsewhere as they wrap up. If I could ask the mic to be passed to our next speaker, Agustín, please speak to us about the Rest Coast project.
Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm coordinating the Rest Coast project. Rest Coast stands for Coastal Restoration, which is a European Union research project within the Green Deal. We are addressing the challenge of how to make coastal systems more resilient to climatic pressures and human pressures. Climatic pressures like sea level rise, changes in wave storminess or seawater temperature, and human pressures like urbanization, coastal rigidization, or pollution. We have selected 9 vulnerability hotspots along the European coast: Baltic, Black Sea, Mediterranean, North Sea, Atlantic. And what we are doing is developing modeling techniques and restoration platforms which link very naturally with the mission on oceans and waters. Regarding modeling, we are developing early warning systems. A number of people have early warning systems, but our innovation is to include ecosystem services when we can raise those green and red lights like a moderator, with and without, for instance, a fringe of wetlands, or with and without a fringe of coastal dunes, or with and without a fringe of seagrass bed. And we have also designed and implemented climatic warning systems where, in terms of very basic variables like coastal width, we advise the stakeholders when to act and how to act out of a portfolio of pre-designed interventions. Second natural link with the mission on ocean and waters is the coastal restoration platforms, which we have organized for the 9 sites, but also we are starting to promote them in other places linked to the project. For instance, in Latin America, in Montevideo, where we organized a seminar last year, or also in Australia, where we plan to organize another one next year. And in these coastal restoration platforms, we sit together stakeholders, administration, NGOs, society, and scientists and researchers and technicians from the project, and we show how by putting together techniques, finance, and governance, we can make nature-based solutions competitive against traditional coastal engineering, against traditional rigid structures, because those nature-based solutions reduce the carbon footprint, so in a way would be decarbonizing a bit coastal protection, but also they contribute to gains in biodiversity and to reduce the carbon footprint because we are promoting coastal blue carbon. And another sort of byproduct we've discovered in those coastal restoration platforms is that in these times of, let me call them climatic gloom, many stakeholders need, let's be classical, a modicum of coastal optimism to act, because otherwise they would be tempted to just move back. And even if we go moving back, that's a very clever English word, very smart word, which is called realignment, but essentially that means moving back. People don't like that too much. So what we found is that in those coastal restoration platforms, a number of stakeholders were in favor of rigidizing the coast, a big seawall, nothing more than that, and others were promoting moving back, because there's nothing we can do. So we're trying to find a middle-of-the-road approach, whereby developing ecosystem services, we reduce erosion risks, we reduce flooding risks, we improve coastal water quality by the filtering effect of those natural ecosystems, we improve productivity, biological productivity, for instance, for the many aquaculture facilities that we have in our pilot cases, and finally we contribute to coastal blue carbon. And we're planning to leave those coastal restoration platforms. Within the project, we shall be providing them with a structure for a coastal restoration contract, so that they act as a sort of legacy for the project, because nature-based solutions take a longer time to develop and a longer time to deliver than the rigid coastal engineering interventions. Thank you.
And thank you very much for those remarks. And one of the things that struck me was, we heard in the first panel about the urgency, and this project is going well beyond the simple provision of scientific information. It is providing advice. And that is often a line that many scientists are reluctant to cross. And I think the urgency before us, particularly in coastal resilience, means we have to be more willing to cross that. Thank you. Next up is Anne-Christine, who will speak to us about Atlantos' success.
Yes. Thank you. And I want to start by acknowledging that Atlantos was a Horizon 2020 project, and I want to invite you to join me in the new era. I know there's been kind of a stagnant period, but we've worked hard in the last 2 years to kind of move on and redefine our space, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I also want to acknowledge all the people that have worked on this. So I'm sure I don't have to explain why the ocean is so important to society, so I won't go in a lot of detail here, but what I want to highlight is that ocean observations underpin really our ability to predict, forecast, and have an impact on society. And our current observing system consists of about just over 8,000 platforms that are in the water and produce about 100,000 observations daily, but we're seeing more and more that this is just not enough to feed into societal needs and meet that expanding need that we're seeing. So, yeah, look over my shoulder. So what we've done, we looked at the key challenges that we identified that we want to tackle within our program, and we're closely working with one of the UN Decade programs, Ocean Observing Co-Design, that I'm the early career ocean professional on, and we identified these key areas. One, we don't have enough information to feed into societal need. There isn't a list of prioritized observations, nor is there a list of prioritized investment in these observations. And we really need to co-design and link across the value chain and work more closely with the user stakeholders to define what their needs are and then meet them through our observation activities. So our vision is really to produce a co-designed observing system that is sustained, integrated, responsive, and agile to user needs. And I'm trying to wrap it up in 4 minutes or 5 minutes. I hope I have enough time. So specific outcomes that we're trying to get to is one, linking across the value chain. So we're doing deep stakeholder assessments based on critical societal areas. We're looking at economic assessments. We're looking at designing and how do we design observing systems using multi-platform approaches, amongst some other, okay, just making sure it advanced. So how do we get there and how do we begin? We have a concept that we call exemplars. They are societal benefit areas where we're trying to kind of redefine and design the observing system in a co-designed fashion so it does meet societal needs. And within those specific, like just as an example, we have one on tropical cyclones, marine heat waves within the co-design program. And around those, we're really looking into where are the gaps, how do we prioritize the gaps, bringing the community together to really hear everyone's needs and then prioritizing on that. And then developing a design system that really meets that service delivery and goes from observations that we're putting in the water to the service and products that society really needs. Okay, current activities. So in Atlanta specifically, what we're working on at the moment is we just submitted an AMOC societal benefit or societal review paper on how AMOC impacts society on various different levels. We're launching this week, actually, the announcement of the Boundary Currents workshop that we're holding in September in South Africa, looking at the Agulhas Current and better understanding those dynamics and how they influence tropical cyclone and marine heat waves in that region. We're also starting conversations around a sargassum workshop that we'll hopefully be putting on for the beginning of 2025. And we're hopefully going to contribute to the AAORIA Stakeholder Forum that is planned for this summer. So thank you, and if you have any questions, you can find me around.
Thank you, and Christine, one of the things that struck me in listening about the next generation of Atlantos is the intentional co-development, and in particular the blueprint for services, having that foremost up front in the determination of what needs to come next. I think that maps very well with what we heard previously about needing to move beyond simple provision of data and technical information to services from the outset. We've got two panelists next that will speak to us about the ocean literacy theme. Ronaldo, you're going to talk to us about Blue Schools. Please.
Exactly. Thank you. The AAORIA Blue Schools Network is a platform for education and engagement with the society. It is directly linked to the Challenge 10 of the UN Ocean Decade to restore human connection with the ocean. All the challenges we have been talking today and over these days of pollution, the need of restore, protection, all the overfishing, all the impacts on the ocean, it has one thing in common, the human being. If the ocean is polluted, it's because someone polluted. We need to change human behavior in order to stop the impacts we do. So how we, our Atlantic Blue Schools Network act on that. We decided to work with schools as a space of engagement from local communities as well. So each school, they decide a project based on their local reality, linking with the challenges at the national level, at the global level. So they start to learn about the ocean, but they bring citizenship. They bring how they can develop their capacities in order to have a better world. And one thing that's really important, as you can see, the network has now actually 18 countries, it's still 16 there. There was we ended the anchor, more than 2,100 children, but we need to recognize that although we have one Atlantic and one ocean for all us, we are very different between the countries. So by looking at the local communities, we bring the cultural reality, the socio-economic realities, and they have all the opportunity to see from their perspective. So working with diversity, equity, inclusion is a central pillar for the Blue Schools. And then by developing a generation that can understand their relationship with the ocean, and we do that through seminars, they develop their projects. There is exchange among students from different countries that can say about their realities. There is a book you can find here that brings the histories of development of the networks within each country, saying their challenges, their opportunities. There is not only one pathway, but there is a lot. So by engaging the schools and engage with the families and communities, we are spreading the word and making a society that can reconnect and understand that we are influenced by the ocean, and our actions influence the ocean. And somehow, that has an indirect effect on the policy and decision maker, because we start to have a society that is talking about it, that is engaged about it. So we start to see mayors, or we start to see, as you listened yesterday from the president of Cape Verde, that mentioned our Atlantic Blue Schools Network as one example of engagement in the country. We also heard the same from the president of Portugal in the UN conference in Lisbon. So we have an indirect way to influence society in different ways by showing that children in the school, they are talking about that. Why not are you doing the same? So that is the way the A-Atlantic is developing.
Thank you very much for that work. And one of the things that strikes me about this slide is reaching 4,500 teachers. And I think about the dividends that will be paid into the future. Temporally, those teachers are going to take these connections and repetitively, in a positive way, touch students for the next full generation. I think that's amazing. Simone, you're up next. Please talk to us about addressing women and youth technical capacity for the blue economy.
Thank you. So YTech Blue was a 3-year pilot project conceptualized and implemented by the .can Institute in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and this was funded by Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So we have just wrapped up our project, but I'm happy to tell you about all the success we've had over the last 3 years. So I'll just go back to highlight our partner countries. So .can is in Halifax, as I mentioned, and our hub in Ghana was in Accra, and in Cabo Verde, we were in Mindelo. So .can, we have our mission and vision there, which I won't read for you, but we are a young nonprofit organization located in Nova Scotia. And so in this project, we were really committed to analyzing gaps and needs in the current international training offerings and trying to address them, especially with a focus on collaborating with partners in country so that we could understand the needs in each country and not coming from a place of telling other people what they should be learning or doing. And so in taking this decolonized approach to capacity development, we've had a huge success with the project. So we were focusing on conveying high-end and practical technical skills and training focused on sustainable livelihoods. In year 1 of our project, we really focused on engaging with partners in each of the hubs to identify, assess, and address gaps in the blue economy in the countries, Canada, Ghana, and Cabo Verde. So what we did in the second year, after we had engaged and mapped all of the partners that we would be collaborating and working with, was a youth perception survey and an industry gap analysis, because it was important for us to link what businesses were doing and where their gaps existed with the training that we were going to deliver. One of the key things we identified and realized was that a lot of businesses within the blue economy were hiring foreign expertise in really technical areas because the capacity wasn't there locally. And that is something that we really tried to address. So once we did that and we had the results, we did a training needs assessment. And in year 3, we started co-designing the curriculum and validating those concepts with industry and with academia in the 3 countries. This was really important to us because we wanted the training to be relevant, and we wanted to make sure that it was building the capacity that we had intended to. We developed our course advisory committees, and the expert roster of instructors that we had was really phenomenal. We had Canada research chairs as part of the instructional team. We had top industry leaders. We had members of the military from Canada, from Ghana, as well as from Cabo Verde. And it was really a high-quality team that I think brought a lot of value to the program. So in designing this 9-week survey-level course, we really had as much of an intercultural learning experience as we did a technical capacity development project. And I think that's where we had a lot of the value. Participants learned so much from one another, as did the instructors. This was our team for our country hubs in terms of the leaders of each of the organizations that we partnered with. So we had Biosfera, which is an NGO in Cabo Verde. In Ghana, we had the Gulf of Guinea Maritime Institute, developing and leading our content on entrepreneurship and leadership was Initiative for Africa. And in Canada, of course, we have .can, which is co-chaired on both sides of the Atlantic by a co-chair in Canada and a co-chair in Cabo Verde. These were the modules for the training program. So we focused on ocean technology, maritime safety and risk management, as well as leadership and entrepreneurship. So I won't read those out, but you can see that we covered some very technical concepts in each of those categories. And we had over 100 applicants, but with limited space, we catered for just about 40, and we had 41 participants in the program who completed the entire program, and they graduated last Saturday. So I'll be happy to answer any other questions, but I have to show you our .can cake, which we had at our graduation ceremony in Cabo Verde. So happy to chat further on this after. Thank you.
All right. Well, and congratulations on the graduation last week. I think it's fabulous whenever you can end your remarks with cake. It always goes better. And I was particularly struck with what you said about the 9-week course being as much a cultural exchange as a technical capacity building, and I think that's so very important. So our final speaker on the panel is now, and he will speak to us about Okeanos CSA.
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Steve said, I'm going to talk to you about Okeano. It's a new project, unlike the other projects being presented this afternoon. Okeano is a coordination and support action funded by the European Union Horizon Europe programme. It started on the 1st of March and will run for 3 years with a budget of €4 million. And it's been coordinated by the Marine Institute. I'll tell you a little bit more about the partners shortly. But first, just the history. I think many of you are probably familiar with the history of the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance. So the tagline for Okeano is supporting the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance. That's what the project is designed to do. The alliance is more than a decade old now, starting with the signing of the Galway Statement in 2013 in my institute, in the Marine Institute in Galway in Ireland, starting with the cooperation between the EU, US and Canada, and then with the Lapenn Statement in 2017 opening up into an All-Atlantic initiative. And then we had, of course, the Washington meeting in 2022, signing of the All-Atlantic Declaration. The growth of the alliance, of course, continues. A greater number of countries and jurisdictions involved. So it really is gaining momentum. And of course, we need these actions to be able, certainly from the European perspective, to support all of the activities of the alliance. So Alliance will provide coordination, services and support to the Alliance, as I've said. It is the third such coordination and support action. Previous actions included the A-AAGORA CSA and the ANCHOR CSA also, which was coordinated. So A-AAGORA was also coordinated by Marine Institute, ANCHOR by FCT in Portugal, by Sofia Cordeiro, who I think should be here in the audience somewhere. So we're very much picking up on the hard work of those partners and those projects and Sofia and her team in ANCHOR. The kickoff meeting took place in March. This is the group. As you can see, this is the consortium. Some members were joined online, but most of our partners were there. We have partners from a number of European countries, but also from South Africa, Brazil, Cabo Verde, Morocco. Argentina will be associated partner. And we have colleagues there from the European Commission as well, including John, who we'll hear from shortly. And of course, we'll collaborate closely with also the US and Canada. So that was the kickoff meeting. And these are the specific objectives of the project. I'm not going to read those out, but very briefly, to support the governance, higher level governance of the Alliance, to facilitate the engagement with stakeholders, particularly at regional, national and regional level, to support some of the ongoing and existing pilot actions and activities that have been part of the Alliance, such as the Blue Schools Network that Ronaldo presented, and the ECOPS is a big part of this as well. Supporting research strategic prioritization in terms of common research goals in the Atlantic, communicating for and on behalf of the Alliance, and I'll give you the website, remind the website on the closing slide, and of course inputting and supporting the 3 All-Atlantic forums, which will take place over the course of the period of this project. In Cape Town, at the last All-Atlantic Forum in Cape Town in November, the high-level board of the AAORIA made a prioritization of these 2 areas to be of particular focus in the coming phase of the Alliance activities. So obviously there's 7 priority areas in the Atlantic Declaration from Washington, but these 2 will receive priority action now. Coastal resilience for communities in the face of climate change, that will be led by the EU, and ocean observation, as we've heard, to be led by the US. So these are really key priority areas that from an Oceano perspective we'll certainly be looking to support, in particular on the coastal resilience. I won't read or go through the slide in any detail. I think the key point to make about this is we're very, very focused on impact and the importance of impact of this project, and that while this is a project supporting a bigger initiative which has grown and developed, as I've said, over 10 years, really the benefit has to accrue, and I think everyone involved agrees with this, and the high-level board have stated this, to coastal communities around the Atlantic, to people around the Atlantic. We've got to see that impact on the ground, so that, and that aligns very much with all of what we're talking about in this conference as well, and through the Ocean Decade activities. So just to mention, obviously this is a slide we borrowed from our colleagues in DFO Canada. They're hosting the next forum in Ottawa, and we're very much looking forward to being part of that on the 8th to the 10th of October, and that will be a big next sort of landmark event for the Alliance, and of course Oceano will be working hard to support that. So that's, I conclude there. This is the website, the atlanticocean.org, the Twitter or X handle there, and my thanks finally to our colleagues in DFO Canada for leading the organisation of this event, and also to my colleagues from the Marine Institute, Veronica French and Laura McDonough, who've done all the hard work behind the scenes from our side, from the coordinating team. Thank you very much.
Niall, thank you very much for those remarks, and thank you to the Oceano team for all of the support that has been provided and will be over the next couple of years. I'm going to give you each 20 seconds. 20 seconds each. I've got one question, I'm giving it to you all. We'll pass the mic down. So to me, it's exceptionally important to understand what motivates individuals, why you have a passion for what you do. So the question I'm giving to you, depending on where the project is that you just described, whether it's just starting or just wrapping up, what touched you personally the most about your involvement, or what motivates you to want to engage in the project that you just talked to us about? 20 seconds each. Niall, you're up first.
So I've had a lot of experience over the years working with people who rely on the marine environment, on the ocean. It could be local aquaculture producers, it could be tourism operators and so on. I see how they are impacted. For example, I can just give a very recent example by a flooding event following Storm Debbie, close to where I live on the west coast of Ireland. It really impacted on people's lives. We can see the impacts of climate change, and ocean and climate are intrinsically linked. We need this cooperation, as was mentioned earlier in the session, through science linking to policy in order to deliver solutions for those people. Thanks.
Thank you.
What motivated me to get involved in the project was because most of the world's youth will be located on the continent of Africa in the coming years. And so to collaboratively work with the youth on the continent and learn from them was the most important thing that we can do for an investment in our future.
Thank you.
What motivates me is to understand that science saves lives, but it's not really the science, it's the use of science. We need to use the knowledge we have by finding new solutions and by looking the new generations and children and understand how they see the science and they propose new ideas. That is strength their capacities, because they will do the change that we need.
I think I changed my answer 5 times already. I think I'm going to go with a personal one. I felt like doing my PhD. I went through that experience and then I thought, great, what now? Did that contribute or was it a minor contribution and I didn't feel that satisfaction at the end? So I really care about connecting that and connecting science to making an impact and being impactful and that everyone, sees that contribution and having that.
Well, in my case, when I started working on beaches, I heard about the protection function, the touristic function here in the Mediterranean, but I also experienced personally and also in my family the soothing power that they can exert on human beings. So I thought it would be important to maintain that, you can call it spiritual or smoothing power for our generation, but also for future generations. And if you look at Mediterranean beaches, you will see a squeezed coastal fringe with stones, hardly no sand, lots of structure, lots of pollution. So no one would ever call that a beach. And same if you look at river-to-coast connectivity, we are still calling our rivers for historical reasons, because they no longer supply enough water, enough sediment. So I thought preserving all that, restoring all that, would be important for all of us.
Okay, so what used to motivate me the most, I'm an ecotoxicologist, so I was out in nature finding pollution and trying to stop pollution. In this context of the project, it's really motivating to me the transdisciplinary approach, that we are working together and we are understanding the pressure, which can be pollution, and we are understanding the ecology, and we are working together with people and citizens, stakeholders, and we're trying to, through all this transdisciplinary work, solve the problems and save the ocean.
Thank you. The Living Lab approach is really motivating me because we are dealing with real problems. We are asking people what are the major concerns regarding this restoration, and by dealing with different starting points, the different demos, different cultures, different geographies, trying to get the associated regions, all this complexity of the goal, but trying to reach the same final goal of restoration. I think this is really a very challenge, and this is really a high motivation.
Thank you very much for your remarks, but also for sharing a bit about yourselves. I'd like to ask for a round of applause, both for their remarks and for the substantive work that went behind all of what they talked about today. And as our second panel departs the stage, I would like to ask my good colleague, John Bell, Director for Healthy Planet in the Directorate General for Research and Innovation at the European Commission, to come to the stage to provide special remarks.
So, welcome to the graveyard slot, everybody. Good afternoon. I love the phrase coastal optimism. We're in a period, you heard Gideon talking, I think, brilliantly about the need for the urgency in policy for science to provide answers that we're not ready to provide in some senses. And this word decade that we have here, this very important convening that the IOC has done to bring science for sustainable development, is also reminding us that this is a decade of decision, but it needs to become a decade of deployment. There needs to be a legacy from this extraordinary convening and mobilization of science, research, innovation and community engagement. And the word generational has been used time and again. The generation coming through, the early researchers who we need to structurally involve in every aspect of our work now, so they don't have to go through the intervening 20 years of torture that most of us went through after we did our doctorates, that they're ready for the challenges ahead. I think this is critical. We know that anxiety, which is everywhere at the moment, is not a policy, but policy needs science to create courage and confidence that solutions can be delivered. And the point that we're dealing with things that are fascinating and at scales that people find difficult to comprehend is one thing, but we have a politics that is in a policy community that is under pressure in different ways. We have people who are nervous and anxious. Somebody was talking about people's decisions about do they go back to their coastal areas, the people living in fisheries communities or farming communities or forestry communities and vulnerable communities, what are they supposed to do in the years ahead? So this is a decade of decision that needs to become a decade of deployment. It means that people like you and us with this brilliance that we've seen here and on the screen, as part of this blue commons that you've already created, needs to be brought into land in places where people can see what sustainability means at the end of the decade. So as a scientific community, this is a step forward in terms of not longer being a set of scientific projects or programs or funds, which is the objective for those of us who worked at the beginning of what is now AORIA were setting out to do. We see these extraordinary initiatives at international, regional, national, local, private sector level, philanthropical level that are out there trying to address the transformation, the restoration of our main life support system, which is disconnected fundamentally from the way that people and decision makers understand the decisions that they need to make. The mission Restore Our Oceans, which you see here, that we've been part of, has an Atlantic-Arctic focus also, which should be working closely together with our ambition for the Atlantic in the future. And in this decade, we need to move beyond the brilliant science and the explorations. We need to start developing, demonstrating, deploying, scaling, and disseminating freely the innovative solutions that will allow all of the communities in their different respects, north and south, east and west, pole to pole, to live a safe, clean, healthy and resilient life. So in our mission, Ocean and Waters, the goal of the mission, if you like, is to try and inspire and mobilize real communities of people living around our oceans and waters around Europe to have the means to address and scale some of the basic problems that are facing them in terms of pollution, decarbonisation, and critically, this very complex and politically sensitive issue of restoration of nature. You've seen what's going on in the European Union at the moment. This is a very difficult space. Our task in the European Union to the 2050, as defined in the Green Deal, is to make peace with nature. But to do that, you need to do it with a purpose for people and societies, and that's the challenge we have. We have more than 500 signatures to the charter of the mission: cities, ports, communities, islands, all kinds of people. They're leveraging about €4.5 billion in terms of what they want to do and how they want to work with science to make this happen. There's also a huge portfolio of projects adding to the work that you're doing. We've seen today with A-AAGORA on local restoration, and ClimaRest looking at resilient communities, and Rest Coast looking at the complex toolboxes. The toolboxes that we have now in science need to be thought about in terms of decision-making supports for policymakers. What are today's scientific questions are tomorrow's policy-making, decision support, critical functions. We've also worked with our member states to create this Sustainable Blue Economy Partnership, an extraordinary mobilisation of 25 countries providing €450 million in investments to boost the transformation to a climate-neutral, sustainable, productive and competitive blue economy. And this includes a node with the Atlantic Ocean. So there is a real structuring and mobilisation and exploration taking place. Within the mission, we have the Atlantic-Arctic Lighthouse, which has to work now more closely with the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation community, with philanthropy, with national efforts, with regional efforts, with some of the work that we're seeing. Ambassador Lapenn, we were talking this morning about we don't need at this point in the decision process of the decade of decision to be thinking all the time about technical institutes and processes and bodies. We need to get to the answers together quickly, and we need to get the answers to the communities as quickly as possible. As everybody has been saying, the changes that are happening, that are inevitable, that are inescapable, mean that we're also entering an area where we need adaptive citizenship, we need resilient communities, and we need a science that is not simply observing but is setting direction in how we need to act, and the questions we need to frame, and the solutions we need to test, pilot, demonstrate and scale. We see the effects of climate change in the polar regions, in the deep water currents, in the ecosystems, in the cities and regions around the oceans, we need better and more accurate anticipation. Policy is going to be asking us as a scientific community to enable more accurate, more long-term, more specific, more integrated anticipatory prediction in the years to come, because big decisions will need to be made in very real local places. And so after our work together, and I want to thank Steve and Gideon and Arran and Gilbert and all of my colleagues, Leandro, we're going to meet each other later on, in the AAORIA process in South Africa, we decided, given the urgency, that this great convening, I mean, the purpose of this is not simply to have a great research and innovation alliance, it's to build this sustainable community from science to society, and we want to have a focus on areas that are critical. And we said that by the meeting in Ottawa, hosted by Canada this year on the 8th to the 10th of October, we will start with a flagship action on resilient coastal communities, so bringing the science to bear in real places where there's real vulnerabilities, and in taking the ocean observation achievements that we have to the next step in terms of having a fit-for-purpose ocean observation system that are there. So we need everybody to connect and mobilize. I know people are driven mad applying for funds and going to conferences and doing all the things that you have to do. But we're at a stage where we need to start seeing, can we do something that has a fundamental impact? And I'll finish on that. So the first thing is the intergenerational aspects of this. I don't know whether human rights are intergenerational, but certainly impacts and consequences are. We must structurally involve the younger generation of scientists and trainee decision makers in all of the things that we're doing, in events like this, in decision-making, in processes, in training, in access to infrastructure, and particularly the ones in the parts of our blue commons who don't have access. And whoever you are in the room, we all need to find a way of funding that and making it a sustainable and an irreversible process. Secondly, I think we need to find a way of taking what these huge issues of scale, these systemic changes that we need, these broad areas that science is looking at, and the infrastructure that's necessary to deliver that. And in this next few years, where we have an increasing degree of legitimate and concerned societal anxiety, resistance, and difficulty, people in real communities need to see the benefits of the science that is being developed in terms of improving things. So if I may, as a concluding remark, maybe make this as an invitation. What can our legacy be for this decade of ocean science for sustainable development? So the mobilization of this extraordinary, it's the Library of Alexandria of the ocean that is being convened and funded and mobilized is impressive. But how does it actually benefit, by the end of this decade, all of these vulnerable different kinds of communities, port cities, islands, coastal regions, indigenous populations, different kinds of people, great cities in some cases? How does all of this, within this decade, impact upon their ability to be resilient and safe and productive? And with that, I would like to invite you as a suggestion here, maybe as a possible legacy of our meeting. Could we develop 100 resilient coastal communities by the end of this decade from all of the activities that we have? From our mission, I will pledge that we will develop 50 resilient coastal communities, provide them with the means for technical assistance, risk assessment, feasibility studies, local engagement and mobilization. And can we, those of you who are involved in national, philanthropic, private, public, regional initiatives, bring together a number of different areas, as I said, vulnerable coastal communities, port cities, islands, communities, and pledge that by the end of this decade, we will actually have applied the science to make the next generation's life around the ocean safe and well. And with that, I thank Arran and her team. She has asked me to thank a variety of people who deserve thanks, some of which I will do now. the Air Centre, of course, Oceano, the Marine Institute, and all of our colleagues in AAORIA and in all of the other initiatives who've joined us here this morning. And I invite you to see what can we achieve as a legacy of this decade, in this decade of decision. Thank you.